This is Dr. George with a podcast on a nice Thursday morning. And this is Citizens Going Wild, Thinking for Yourself in an Age of Hype and Nonsense. There's a lot of spending going on in Washington, in case you haven't noticed. You might not have noticed yet because the spending hasn't actually begun. But there are two big, gigantic bills in Washington, D.C. One was just passed. It's for solid infrastructure, stuff that you would bump into in the night if you didn't have a flashlight with you. Bridges, roads, dams, big construction projects, which almost everyone likes because the politicians get to pose with when the highway is done. People get good jobs. They're going to be well paid. They will be, as Biden said, mainly union jobs. And we all get to ride on highways and get wherever we're going sooner. And it helps the economy. It helps just everyone. Everyone loves solid infrastructure. In addition, the Democrats have decided they want to, in effect, imitate a European social welfare state, which is not a bad thing, by the way. We have much the same welfare state in the United States, but theirs is a lot more fulsome. They give money when you give birth to a child. They take care of babysitting your child before they go to school, after they go to school. They do a lot of nice stuff that only really rich people or maybe upper middle class people do in America. And the idea was to kind of equalize because it is good for the welfare of the country and the welfare of the children in particular. And a basic idea is to move working level people up to middle class level living. And as we go through this, you can see how this can be done. Okay, this program is called Build Back Better, which is BBB, if you like that sort of thing. And it basically expands social programs to elevate the working class to the middle class. They're all good programs in my view. For example, there's money for children. You have a kid, we ship you a check. Who knows how much, 300, 600. The final amount hasn't been settled yet. But we send you some money because children are expensive. If you haven't had any, you'll see. Oh boy, will you see. Money for children, period. Just for showing up with a child, you get some money. There's an equal income tax credit, and I want you to pay special attention to this. It's one of my favorite programs. At the end of every year, the government looks at how much you made, and if you're working your heart out and you only made a small amount of money, let's say $20,000 a year, the government will then ship you a check for a couple of $1,000s more. It's poorly done. It should be done as they do it in Europe on a monthly basis or a bi-weekly basis. Nonetheless, it's a good idea in my opinion. I like the idea of helping people who are helping themselves. It's a good idea. There's universal preschool. We used to go to kindergarten. That was the end of that show. But now they decided that you do better if you have some sort of preschool, if you have school from like 0 to 4. And not everyone can afford to do this, and not everyone has a place where they can send the kid. And this would help people who are basically working people who would like to go to work but can't, or go to work but they're never sure where their kid's going to end up that day. This would help them. There are child care subsidies so that everyone has a place where they can put the child. It's a good place for the children. Perhaps they learn, they socialize. It's a good place for the children to be, and not everyone can afford this. The middle class affords this. It usually costs them around $12,000 a year. So it would help the working middle class as well. And after universal preschool, and universal child care subsidies. We go on to things like medical care. This program that they have, that the Democrats have now, Build Back Better, basically it subsidizes people at mid-level incomes so that they can afford Obamacare. A lot of people have gotten medical care, medical insurance really, through Obamacare, but there were a number who were left out and who need some subsidies to afford medical care and to know it's always there. I like all of these programs. There's a little problem though with paying for them because we're already paying for trillion, maybe $2 trillion worth of infrastructure projects. This will cost goodness knows how much, but it will certainly be delineated in its trillions. 1 trillion, 2 trillion, my guess would be somewhere between $3 and $4 trillion. Now, to get this through, the Democrats have, well, in impolite society, we would call it lied. They've lied a ton. They've used a kind of this hide and seek method. I think that we should just face up to the fact that providing everyone in America with a reasonably good life is going to cost a darn fortune. And we're going to have to raise taxes. We're going to have to raise them a great deal. We're going to have to raise them to European levels. In this country, generally speaking, people pay taxes. You know, this is a generalization, but they pay about 35, perhaps up to 40% of their income in taxes, state, local, all taxes. To make all of these programs available to everyone and to move basically the working class up into the middle class, at least by benefits, you would have to spend, I don't know, 40 or 45% of, you would have to send 40 or 45% of your income to the government. In Europe, this is what they do, and no European country has been able to get around it. Sometimes they differ in how much they spend exactly, but no matter what you do, you end up with a situation where you have to pay somewhere around 40, 50, 60% of your income in taxes. This would alarm most Americans. So what the Democrats have done, and whether this is a good thing or not is up to you, is they basically hidden the cost. How have they done this? Well, they will say to the Congressional Budget Office, which does the figuring on this sort of thing and tells you how much everything costs, they will say, well, why don't you count up the amount of money that would have to go for a universal preschool, do it for 1 year, which is preposterous. They're going to end up doing it for every year. But what will happen is, as that 1 year goes away, the first year comes to an end. On paper, it looks as if it is that cost is going away. And they do this sort of hide and seek with all these areas. Universal preschool, child care subsidies, subsidies for Obamacare, all sorts of basically subsidies so we can give to the working poor and maybe the non-working poor the type of benefits that hitherto has only been available for rich people or maybe upper middle class people, or if maybe the middle class, if they want to get strung out and spend their evenings yelling at each other about the budget. Now, let me give you another illustration. Let's say you wanted to subsidize childcare. All right. So you can say the cost is over a 10-year period, which is the usual way of estimating costs. What will it cost over 10 years? Well, over a course of 10 years, it may be $500 billion. But if you say we're only going to have this for 2 years, it will obviously cost a good deal less. And this is what they did, and this is how the Congressional Budget Office scored it. The Congressional Budget Office has no interest in policy. It has an interest in accuracy and estimates. And if you tell them just add it up for 1 year, they'll add it up for 1 year. You tell them add it up for 5 years, they'll add up the total cost for 5 years. Adding things up in this strange and obvious illegitimate manner results in a figure of somewhere around 3 or 4 trillion. I think the most recent figure is $2.3 trillion, whatever the hell that means. But it's obviously a lie. Americans want to get benefits, but they don't seem to want to pay for benefits, and they're especially not interested in paying for the benefits for their neighbor. So here we are. Fortunately, I have a solution. It's not an elegant solution, but it's a good, solid way to look at this sort of thing. We have a program that I mentioned, Earned Income Tax Credit. And we give money to people, just a few $1,000s really, if they don't make much money, if they only have an income of $18,000 or $23,000 and they have a family of 4. We send them some money at the end of the year. Instead of doing that, let's be honest, and let's say we give them a set amount, for example, $1,000 a month. Everyone gets $1,000 a month if they're working, okay? And not everyone, obviously you'd have a cutoff point somewhere around, I don't know, 150,000 maybe. And people below that would get an extra $1,000 a month. How much would it cost? A damn fortune. The cost would be in the trillions, but it would be an honest number. And what I like about it, it's not only an honest number, always a good thing, but it would allow people to make individual choices. In other words, if you need more food in the house, you spend your $1,000 or at least a few hundred on food. If you need daycare, you spend it on daycare. If you need money for everyday expenses, you spend it on that. You spend it on whatever you want. Will some people be irresponsible? Yes. They've been practicing being irresponsible for years, sometimes for decades. It's their thing. No matter what you do, they'll act like jackasses. But this happens with Social Security and every other benefit that we have. They act like jackasses when you give them free medical care, when you give them free anything. There's a certain percentage of the people who have dedicated their lives to acting like jackasses. And there'll be plenty of stories about them, don't you worry. Nonetheless, most people act reasonably well. In fact, most people probably act just as well as you do. So this would be a more honest program. Would it cost more in taxes? You bet it would cost more in taxes because the government has no money. The only money it has is your money. I think it would be a good idea that would give everyone else a reasonably good life. I mean, this is what government can do. For a really good life, you need things that the government is all out of and always has been, like love. But you can have a government that helps people, and this would help people. Would the taxes skyrocket? Yes, they would skyrocket. But some of the bite of this high taxes situation would be mitigated by the fact that we can have much, much, much higher taxes than we have now. After World War II, we had a long period of time where the top tax bracket was 90%. And what happened? Nothing bad. We all lived a fairly happy life then. I would say perhaps even better than we live now, except for medical machines. And every time we became more prosperous, everyone took a slice. Some took a little more, some took a little less, but everyone got a slice. And the gap between the workers and the owners stayed fairly stable and fairly reasonable. It is no longer reasonable. this is what I would contribute to. This is my idea that yes, we raise taxes, but mainly on people who earn a lot of money and who are not going to be running out of food soon, folks. But it will have to come from a lot of people, including, yes, the middle class. We'll get a lot out of it. I read an article a while back, and it was about Sweden. And this guy was complaining and complaining about taxes in Sweden and how high they are, about 60% of your income. But then he stopped and he said, you know what? I pay these taxes because I know my grandmother will be taken care of. And that's part of life too. You don't have to worry about that. In Sweden, you don't have to worry about college uh, um, expenses. No one in Sweden ends up owing $100,000, $200,000 because they went to school, went to graduate school, went to medical school, whatever. You can be rest assured that everyone who's bleeding in the town square in Sweden will be taken care of, as well as the richest person in Sweden. It's a relaxing feeling that you'll never fall to the bottom again, no matter what. Will there be some corruption? Yes, there's some corruption. The hell, there's corruption now. I think it's a good idea to have that sort of welfare state, or at least perhaps a modified version of it, not as fulsome, but still across the board, we take care of you from the instant you were born to the instant you die. That's not a bad thing in my mind. It's a kind of a nice thing. And then we can get on with our lives and meditate and learn to live a better life and love more. Thank you very much. And let me know what you think of this.